Hello, friends, and welcome to our in-depth study through the book of Ruth. Today, we begin at the very start with Ruth chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. In these opening lines, a famine grips the land of Israel during the era of the Judges, a time marked by chaos, moral decline, and cycles of disobedience, followed by deliverance. This particular family, hailing from the small town of Bethlehem in Judah, decides to seek relief in the neighboring country of Moab. The father, Elimelech, leads his wife, Naomi, and their two young sons, Mahlon and Chilion, across the border, hoping for better days. But instead of provision, tragedy unfolds. Elimelech dies suddenly, leaving Naomi to raise her boys alone. The sons grow up, marry local women named Orpah and Ruth, but after just a decade, both Mahlon and Chilion pass away too. Naomi is left utterly alone, widowed, childless, and stranded far from home. It's a story of escalating loss, where every step toward survival seems to dig a deeper hole of despair. At the heart of this passage stands our big idea for today. Emptiness is the soil of God's redemptive harvest. This idea isn't just a tagline, it's the thread that weaves through the entire book of Ruth. The book as a whole unfolds like a quiet counterpoint to the turbulent book of Judges that precedes it. While Judges shouts of battles and betrayals, Ruth whispers of God's subtle work in the ordinary lives of overlooked people. From this initial emptiness, famine, death, isolation, God cultivates something extraordinary: loyalty, redemption, and even a place in the lineage of King David, and ultimately, Jesus himself. Our big idea reminds us that what feels like barren ground in our own stories is often the very place where God plants seeds of restoration. It's not about glorifying pain, but recognizing how God uses our voids to grow his purposes. To fully grasp this, consider how the book of Ruth, with its 4 short chapters, stands as a gem in the Old Testament, a narrative of grace amid judgment, showing that God's redemptive plan doesn't require heroes or miracles, just everyday faithfulness in the face of hardship. To explore this, we'll walk through 3 main events drawn straight from the text. First, the famine that drives the family from home, setting the stage for emptiness. Second, the death of Elimelech, marking the first deep cut of loss. And third, the marriages and subsequent deaths of the sons, plunging Naomi into profound isolation. These events aren't arbitrary. They mirror the natural flow of the narrative, building layer upon layer of desolation that prepares the ground for God's harvest. As we dive in, keep in mind that inductive study like this, observing the text closely, interpreting its meaning, and applying it personally, helps us uncover layers we might miss in a quick read, drawing us deeper into God's story. First, let's look at the famine that drives the family away. We'll start by reading the text itself. Ruth, chapter 1, verses 1 through 2, from the New International Version. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the whole land, and a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and their 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. As we observe this opening, what stands out right away? The timing, in the days when the judges ruled. That's a deliberate hook back to the book of Judges, a period of about 300 years where Israel repeatedly rebelled against God, faced oppression, and saw judges rise to deliver them. But here, no judge appears, just a famine in the whole land. It's comprehensive, touching everyone, not just the edges. Notice the family's origin. Bethlehem, meaning house of bread, in Judah, the southern tribe known for its faithfulness. Yet even this breadbasket town yields nothing. The names pop with meaning too. Elimelech means, my God is king. Naomi means pleasant. Mahlon sickly. Chilion pining or wasting away. They're Ephrathites, linked to the ancient town of Ephrath, a clan with deep roots. And their destination? Moab, a land born from Lot's incestuous relationship with his daughter, historically hostile to Israel. This isn't a vacation. It's a survival move, a sojourn that hints at temporary relief but carries undercurrents of compromise. The word sojourn here, from the Hebrew gur, implies a temporary dwelling, like a guest in a foreign house, underscoring their outsider status, even in Moab. When we dig into interpreting this, the famine isn't random weather. It's a symptom of Israel's spiritual drought, as Deuteronomy chapter 28 warns that disobedience brings such curses. In that chapter, God outlines blessings for obedience and curses for rebellion, including failed crops and widespread hunger as signs of covenant breach. Elimelech's decision reflects a human response. When home turns hostile, we seek greener pastures. But observe the silence of God here. No voice from heaven, no pillar of cloud, just the grind of packing up and crossing borders. The text doesn't judge the move outright, but it plants seeds of irony, fleeing famine to a place of forbidden intermingling. Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 3. Bars Moabites from the assembly. This departure from Bethlehem isn't just physical. It's a subtle drift from God's promised land, echoing Israel's broader wanderings in Judges. Yet inductively, we see God's sovereignty peeking through the cracks. The family doesn't perish immediately, allowing time for the story to unfold. This event sets a tone of vulnerability, reminding us that even faithful families like the Ephrathites aren't immune to the consequences of a nation's sin, but neither are they abandoned in it. Tying this back to our big idea, emptiness is the soil of God's redemptive harvest. We recognize the famine as the first tilling of that soil. Emptiness here is literal. No food, no security. But it mirrors the hollow ache we feel when life withers. Just as a farmer plows fallow ground to break up the hardpan and expose nutrients, God allows this void to uproot the family, positioning them for unexpected growth. Think of it like a rancher during a drought. Fields cracked and dust choked, where nothing green stirs. But after the plow cuts deep and rains finally come, those same fields erupt in golden wheat, taller than before because the roots had to reach deeper. That's the redemptive harvest. Not despite the emptiness, but through it. This agricultural image isn't accidental. Ruth is set against harvest seasons, symbolizing how God turns scarcity into surplus over time. For personal application here, consider where famine-like emptiness shows up in your life. Maybe it's financial strain that forces a job change, or relational drought that pushes you toward unlikely connections. This text challenges us not to curse the barrenness, but to till it prayerfully, asking God to reveal what seeds He's planting. What if your current lack is the very soil where He grows resilience or new community? Lean into that trust today. Journal one area of emptiness and name one way God might harvest good from it. Take it further. Spend 5 minutes in silence, visualizing that empty field in your heart, and invite God to show you the first green shoot He might be nurturing there already. Next, we'll turn to the death of Elimelech, the first deep loss in this unfolding story. Let's read Ruth chapter 1, verse 3. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. Observing this verse, it's stark in its brevity, just words in English, yet it lands like a thunderclap. No details on how or why Elimelech dies. No illness narrative. No heroic last words. The text shifts instantly from the family's arrival in Moab to this gut punch. Now died. The word now acts like a pivot, marking time's indifference. Naomi is left, a passive verb implying abandonment, not choice. Her 2 sons, still young enough to be unnamed in action here, become her sole anchors. Inductively, we note the pattern emerging: provision sought, provision denied. The man whose name declares, "My God is king," bows to a greater king, but in a foreign soil that underscores vulnerability. This suddenness invites us to pause. In a world without modern medicine, death could strike swiftly, leaving families reeling without warning or closure. In explanation, this death interprets the cost of displacement. In ancient Near Eastern culture, a husband's role was protector and provider. Without him, a widow's status plummeted, economically, socially, legally. Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 5 through 6, outlines levirate marriage to safeguard lineages, a custom where a brother was obligated to marry his deceased sibling's widow to produce an heir and preserve the family name and inheritance. It was a protective measure in a patriarchal society, ensuring widows weren't left destitute and that property stayed within the clan. But here, no such safety net exists yet. Naomi is in Moab, far from relatives, with only young sons. Theologically, it echoes the losses in Judges, where leaders die and chaos reigns, but on a micro scale. God isn't absent. He's authoring a narrative where human frailty highlights divine faithfulness. Elimelech's death isn't punishment. The text doesn't say that, but a thread in the tapestry of emptiness that God weaves for redemption. It's the first stripping away, leaving Naomi exposed, much like the exposed roots of a tree after a flash flood, where the waters carve away the bank but force the trunk to grip harder into the earth. This vulnerability forces a reliance on God that might not have developed in the comfort of home, turning potential self-sufficiency into humble dependence. Now, connecting this to our big idea, emptiness is the soil of God's redemptive harvest. We see how this loss embodies the breaking of the ground. Emptiness deepens from scarcity to severance, the pain of what's irreplaceably gone. Yet, like compost enriching depleted soil, think of how ranchers spread manure from winter feedlots to revive worn pastures. God uses this grief to fertilize future fruitfulness. Naomi's solitude isn't the end. It's the aeration that allows grace to penetrate. Consider how this mirrors broader biblical patterns. Abraham's long wait and barrenness before Isaac, or Hannah's childlessness before Samuel, emptiness as the precursor to divine intervention. Applying this personally, reflect on your own left-behind moments. A spouse's passing, a parent's decline, a dream's burial. This event invites us to grieve without grudge, seeing such deaths, literal or figurative, as holy ground for God's work. How might God be using your current aloneness to deepen your dependence on Him? Challenge yourself this week. Share your loss with a trusted friend, not to fix it, but to let God till the soil through vulnerability. What harvest of empathy or strength could emerge? Perhaps even start a small ritual, like lighting a candle each evening to honor the loss while whispering thanks for the growth it invites. Finally, let's consider the marriages and deaths that seal the isolation for Naomi. We'll read Ruth chapter 1, verses 4 through 5. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. As we observe these verses, the pace quickens across a decade in just 2 lines. The sons marry, Mahlon to one wife, Chilion to the other, though the text pairs them implicitly, but it focuses on the wives. Orpah and Ruth, both Moabites, outsiders to Israel's covenant. About 10 years suggests stability, perhaps hope blooming amid grief. But then, the double blow. Both also died. No cause given, just finality. Naomi is left without. The Hebrew emphasizes total depletion, no heirs, no buffer. Inductively, names foreshadow. Mahlon and Chilion, meaning sickly and wasting, live up to their monikers. The marriages, while culturally adaptive, introduce complexity. Moabite unions risked idolatry, yet God redeems even this. The repetition of left bookends the passage, framing escalating voids. This compression of time, 10 years in a breath, forces us to imagine the quiet joys and building fears in that span. the slow build to shattering. Interpreting these moments, they show emptiness compounding like interest on a debt. 10 years imply Naomi poured her life into her boys, only to face compounded widowhood. In a patrilineal society, sons were legacy carriers. Their deaths erase continuity, leaving no one to inherit land or continue the family line under Jewish custom. Yet, the inclusion of Orpah and Ruth isn't incidental. These foreign women become central, subverting expectations. Biblically, it parallels stories like Tamar in Genesis chapter 38, where widowhood and barrenness yield messianic lines. A widow who cleverly invokes levirate rights to secure her future and perpetuate her husband's name. God's redemptive harvest often sprouts from forbidden or fractured places, turning cultural taboos into testimonies. Here, the intermarriage, though unconventional, sets the stage for Ruth's pivotal role, showing how God uses even our compromises to advance his purposes. Looping back to our big idea, emptiness is the soil of God's redemptive harvest. This final layer becomes the deepest furrow. From famine to familial annihilation, Naomi's world empties like a silo after harvest season, vast, echoing, ready for reseeding. Imagine a wheat field stripped bare by combines in late summer. The stubble looks desolate, but beneath, the earth rests, nutrients pooling for the spring planting. So too, God tills through layered losses, preparing for Ruth's faithfulness to yield eternal fruit. This event reminds us that total depletion isn't defeat. It's the ultimate preparation for abundance, where every human support crumbles to reveal divine sufficiency. For application, this challenges us in our compounded empties, when one loss piles on another, like job loss followed by health scares. It calls us to hold loosely, trusting God to repurpose the rubble. What behaviors does this shift? Instead of isolation, pursue community, even with outsiders. This week, reach out to someone on the margins of your life. Invite them for coffee, and watch how God might harvest connection from your void. How does believing this reshape your view of unending grief? It turns despair into expectation. To deepen this, try mapping your losses on paper. List 3 deaths in your story. Then beside each, note a potential resurrection God might be plotting, drawing from Ruth's turnaround. As we wrap up this first lesson on Ruth chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, let's restate our big idea one more time. Emptiness is the soil of God's redemptive harvest. We've seen it unfold through the famine that uprooted the family, the death of Elimelech that widowed Naomi, and the losses of Mahlon and Chilion that left her utterly alone. These aren't isolated tragedies. They're the prepared ground where God's story takes root. This text doesn't just tell a tale of ancient sorrow. It challenges how we think about the empty places in our lives. Do we view them as curses or as cultivated spaces? It probes what we believe. Is God sovereign even in silence, turning voids into vineyards? And it reshapes how we behave. Will we till our soil through prayer and pursuit of others, or let it lie, fallow in fear? Friends, carry this big idea into your week. Let emptiness invite you to God's harvest. May He plant deeply in your barren places, yielding abundance you can't yet imagine. Now, take a look at the show notes for questions to reflect on. You can use them in your small group or just take a few moments to reflect on your own. If you like this study, please like and subscribe for more just like it. Until next time, grace and peace.